Careful, his sight has a bite. Here's your look at the Mattel Master Universe Origins, Snakeface, the most gruesome of the Snake Man warriors. Snakeface's evil enchanted gaze turns his enemies into stone statues. Before we see what slithers on Snakeface, let's grab the tape measure first and see how tall the figure stands. Now, I've got him with his legs standing straight. You can, of course, if you want to make him look like his more retro self, you can bend his elbows, bend his knees, and have him looking like that. I prefer myself to have all my figures standing straight, though. And with that in mind, the figure stands exactly 6 inches in height, or the figure's going to be 14.5 centimeters tall. I still don't have King Hiss, dang nabbit, but I do have at least the rest of the Snake Men. We can bring in those right now. Here's what the figure looks like with Cobra Khan. Here's what the figure also looks like with Tongue Lashor, if I can get him hopefully to stand. And the one that was really the least interested to bring in just by the standing issues that he has, here's also what the figure looks like with Ratlor. Yeah, again, the only figure I'm still missing from the rest of the Snake Men, or at least to complete the Snake Men, is King Hiss. Mark my words, I will be getting him hopefully shortly. As for, though, the figure's accessories, Snakeface comes included with a mini-comic. The mini-comic in this case is entitled Viper's Vice, and not only does feature Snakeface here on the front, it looks to be also the fact that they seem to have some Snake Men in the background there, but also very predominantly featured not only on the front cover, but also throughout the comic is Dragon Blaster Skeletor. I figure we will be looking at in an upcoming review. There's Stinkor, there's also Beastman in the back corner there also as well. Love these mini comics. And because I did order this online, laughable it still is the state of Canadian stores when it comes to Motu stuff. What's the point of even going into a local Walmart or Toys R Us with the plan of picking up anything Master Universe? Because you're going to be walking out empty-handed. And again, once again, that sense of just being defeated. So instead, what I did, I just ordered this online. And if you are finding these anyways, by the way, in the wild, and you are a Canadian collector, let me know if the mini comics included with your figures do in fact now have dialogue, or if they are still blank. Either way, though, flipping through what little there is of pages, you can see again, like there's like the Snake Men, Army Men, loving the look of those guys. And there's also a couple of land sharks. I like the look of the land shark. A lot of cool stuff going on the mini comic. I didn't want to spoil too much of it. On the back, though, advertised, there's Snake Face, there's Snake Tila, a figure we will be looking at in an upcoming review, Snake Trooper, Dragon Blaster Skeletor, King Randor, a new King Randor, and Slamurai. Slamurai. I would just pick the figure up alone for that name. I mean, he kind of looks like Shinobi, but he in this case is called Slamurai. Love that name. Going to move that to the side. Then, of course, the figure's accessories. Now, one thing does get gifted to this figure that wouldn't have been released in the original vintage Snakeface, and that's a swappable head sculpt. We're going to talk more about this in a moment. First, though, the figure comes included with a shield. The shield seems to look exactly the same as the one that we did get from the 80s. I don't know if it was attached the same way, as it looks like it's clearly the case where the handle is a separate plastic than the rest of the shield. The shield, though, to its credit, does have a lot of cool decorative detailing to it. You can see it makes up, well, the majority of the shield would be safe to say looks like a series of serpents that all sort of intermingling with one another, having a real party, a real blast. This can, though, fit into his hand. I mean, he does have the means to hold the shield in either one of his hands, so that's at least something. Just clip that into his hand for right now, at least. Put that right there. The shield, I've noticed, as well as the, I don't know if what you would call that, a scepter, does add some unnecessary weight on the front of the figure. So if you find myself, or you see me, just kind of periodically bending Snakeface back, that's the whole reason why. The figure also comes included with a serpent scepter. Every single time I look at this, I always think the same thing. It looks like Galobulus's serpent timer that he has in Cobra La, G.I. Joe the movie, although much larger in this case. It's spiraled all the way around. In fact, we've actually gotten this scepter many times over. In this case, it's actually been handled in a more of a darker green. Not really a green that really finds appearance anywhere else on the figure's body. The closest thing would probably be to the boots, but the boots are a little bit more bluer than the scepter that he has. Now, when it comes to him wielding this, the best place I find may not very well be the best place that you'll find, but I find it clips best right here. You can kind of clip that around his hand, and he does as best of a job to kind of hold that in place. But again, I I'm probably not going to be displaying it with the figure. It's there anyways. I did want to, of course, bring it to your attention. This and this, as far as I know, were available with the original 80s release of Snakeface. What, though, was different was the fact that the figure came included with an alternate head sculpt. I feel like I'm a little cheated the fact that this guy does not have a gimmick. Now, gimmicks mostly have fallen at the wayside when it comes to Motu Origins figures. Some of them have still kept their original gimmick, their original feature. Snakeface, unfortunately, is part of the casualties that does have his removed. The original one would have actually had a little lever that you pulled up and down. It matched actually the same color of his eyes and his mouth. But when you brought it up, it would not only extend out the eyes, extend out the serpents in his eyes, extend also his tongue, but I believe it also would lift forward the little serpents on the front of his chest. Doing away with that now altogether, what they've done instead is they've swapped it out with this interchangeable head sculpt that replicates the original one just by adding some additional serpents. These snakes slithering out the sockets, that's a lot of S's, and you can also see the snakes are coming out the back of his hair as well. I mean, it's an okay thing, and I'm glad to see at least. I would feel totally robbed if the fact that this figure only came looking like this and didn't give you at least this available means. But I would have said, Mattel, do one better. At least they could have included the gimmick. And I guess they just had the idea in mind. I mean, really, this has to use a brand new mold. It's not even just a case where they have to use like an existing Master Universe body. There really is no real reason why they couldn't have just simply put the lever there on the back of the figure's body, unless they just didn't want to have to put mechanics in there, as it could be something that could potentially break, especially if the kids are roughhousing with their figures. But if you did want to change out the head, just quickly looking at the defaulted one that we get, I like the coloring of the gray that they've used, and it certainly does work well with the popping of the red in the eyes and the tongue. Spinning around, you can see as well the snakes there on the back. In the 2000X He-Man series, it was actually more kind of resembling that of I'm drawing a blank as to the name of the character here. Medusa, thank you. Where actually the serpents would come out. His face was a little bit smaller, obviously, than that. And even like the design of his body was completely different than what we get here with the original release. But to change out the head, now remembering Medusa, we're just simply going to pop the head off the ball joint. And we're going to then replace the new head in place. It's fairly easy, in fact, to change the heads. And it doesn't necessarily lose any of the articulation. It still fully is intact when it comes to the figure, so you can still move it up and down and back and forth. But it doesn't do anything other than what it's doing right now. And that's fine. It's still good. But man, I would have still loved for a gimmick to be included with some of these figures. Not at the sake of sacrificing the figure's articulation, but he never really had anything that sacrificed the figure's articulation anyways, to my knowledge. It was simply just a case of having a lever moving up and down, and they unfortunately removed it in this case. But still, you get a face that has quite a lot of snakes. 5 in total, if technically you count the tongue, even though the tongue doesn't really look as much like a snake. It looks kind of more like just a snake tongue. It does look very cool, though. I'm going to keep that on for right now. And to complete the look, we'll just bring his arms out of the way. Now, again, that thing on the back that I was already talking about way too much, bringing that up would also have brought these forward. You drop down the little snakes that are located in the front of his torso. One is a little easier to get than the other. Bringing those out there, you can see there's little snakes colored in green this time around. And it looks as well like there's snakes on the inside of his body too. Now, I don't know if these snakes are also supposed to be coming out, or maybe they just take turns. This is the shift work for these snakes for right now, and then later on when they go for lunch, the snakes in the back take turns. Nice coloring of the green there on the front. It's the same green that they use for the snakes on the front. And then again, he's got the belt there colored nicely in that same green. It's a really colorful looking character. I also like the way that they've actually airbrushed a transitional color of this lighter green. The green doesn't seem to make any other appearances on the figure, even like, well, I guess a little bit on the top of where the little snake heads will be. So at least there's some continuation of color right there. But, you know, all it's a good figure from head to toe. I just wish, again, like the figure could have still maintained a gimmick on the back of his body. There, I'll stop talking about it altogether. For the figure's articulation, let's just close these back up shop right now. We've already looked at the fact that the head does rotate, and we'll kind of wrap things up in that department. But we'll move the arms all the way around. He still retains all the same articulation as every other, mostly all other Motu Origins figures. Arms rotate all the way around. There is a single hinge only in the elbow. A little tighter on my figure. He does rock back and forth also in the forearms, and you can rotate the hands all the way around with a hinge back and forth. The waist does swivel. The legs do split. You can bring the legs forward and back, and the bend at the knee with a lower rotation in the knee area. You can rotate the boot, and you can also hinge the ankles back and forth and rock them back and forth this way. If you did want to revert this guy back to the way his original retro look was, simply just bend the elbows. So those arms are going to be permanently like this. Bring the legs forward, bend the knees. A little harder, a little stiffer on my figure.
bring the knees forward again this way, and then that's what he would have looked like in his original 80s release. For me, at least, I like to extend the legs more so. First of all, it gives him a little bit more height. It proportions the body, I feel, just a little bit better. And I just think he looks nicer with the straighter legs. That's just my own honest opinion. And short of, again, not having King Hiss available, we can bring back in the rest of the Snake Men. There's Tongue Lasher. Trying to remember all these names. Of course, we've got ourselves Ratlore. Always has the harder time to stand, simply just because his tail is so long. There's Ratlore. And we also had ourselves Cobra Khan. I don't know why I always have to say it with Cobra Khan. But yeah, nice looking Snake Men overall. I'm still missing the one, but then when the one is done, and of course now we eventually will be getting ourselves the Snake Army Men, yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff coming to us from the folks over at Mattel. And I know initially, a while ago, earlier reviews, I did say that Mattel was pretty much done with the whole Motu stuff. That stuff, rumblings, I heard more online. It seems that the Master Universe is very healthy, very well alive, and we are getting some brand new figures courtesy of the folks over at Mattel. What you guys are all seeing right now is that Snakeface does have his knees bent back a little bit, and it doesn't take much of a detective to figure out the real reason why I did do that, simply by now having two snakes sticking out the front of his torso, kind of like Duke from G.I. Joe the movie. We're still referencing G.I. Joe the movie. It's okay, guys. Duke was just in a coma. He's okay now. But with that, and then you've got the snake sticking out of every hole in the front of his face, and then you add a heavier shield in his hand. That all adds up to a figure that's very front heavy. And you would not want to have a figure take like a tumble like this and break any of the things I just already mentioned, especially those little snakes on the front of his chest. Duke's okay, guys. Snake Face, I was going to call him Serpent Face. Snake Face, unfortunately, does do away with the gimmick that made this guy so cool in the first place. I may have even had Snake Face as a kid growing up, or I may have had a friend. If you weren't one as a kid in the 80s that didn't have a specific toy, you always knew someone that did. Either he was lucky enough to live on your street, or he was just a kid that you went to school with, and then he would always say afterwards, maybe every once in a while, you would cross your fingers and hope that they would say those words. You want to come over to my house after school, and you think to yourself, yes, I get to play with his Master Universe toys. Of course, hang out with him as well. But yes, I get to play with his Master Universe toys. I think he did have Snake Face. And yes, while I would have been happier to have the little gimmick feature on the back of his body, it's not really a case either that they're using a He-Man body and they have to retool something, and of course the cost and the expenses of going into tool a brand new body. This guy from head to toe is a brand new body anyways. I don't think it would have been much to ask that they could have added and still kept the lever on the back of the figure's body. Now, to credit Mattel, they at least included a secondary head sculpt. If you feel robbed like I feel robbed, and again, I'm only the person that's reviewing toys behind the camera, so take mine with a grain of salt. If you are feeling robbed by the fact that the figure doesn't have the working feature, at least they did include to their credit a secondary head sculpt that you can replicate the look without having to do anything on the back of the figure's torso. I would rather have the gimmick myself, but at least appreciate the fact that they would have included a secondary head, to which I'll likely be displaying with the figure. I know for me, at least, when it comes to displaying these guys on the shelf, I tend to revert them back to the way that they looked in the original 80s toy line. So as an example, when we did have a look at Leech, I did say like I like the modernized head, but I was probably still going to be sticking with the retro head. When it comes to displaying the guys, I'm usually displaying with the retro head, but this is a guy that's a little harder because his head is technically still part of the gimmick. It just happens to be the case where the lever's already been brought forward and the snake's already sticking out. So I might still decide to display this guy as you'll see him right now. But what do you guys think of Snake Face? Let me know down below in the comment section. And do you think, I know most of the time they've done away with all the gimmicks altogether, but do you think in a case like this, Mattel could have easily kept the gimmick on the back of Snake Face's body? Let me know down below in the comment section. If you guys enjoyed this video, why not hit with a like? If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly do want to stick around for more Master Universe origins, by the way, as already mentioned, we will be looking at Dragon Blaster Skeletor. His review will be coming up shortly, and there's a couple of other ones as well that we will be looking at in upcoming videos. If you don't want to miss out on any of that, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. And as well, if you guys don't want to miss out on any of that, make sure you turn on the bell notification so you're going to get reminders from YouTube every single time this guy behind the camera posts something new. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.